What's up, y'all? This is Evan with Backwoods Adventure Mods. Today we're going to walk through an installation of our new rock sliders for the second and third gen Tacoma. These fit the double cab short bed. These are going to be a hybrid style slider and step, so you get the protection of the rock slider with the function of the step. These are a 0 degree and they have the Kickout. They're made from 1 3/4 inch DOM steel tube, and they have the same black textured powder coat that the rest of our products have. Just a quick note, these always come powder coated and at the 0 degree with the Kickout and with the top plate. We don't currently have any other variants available. But these come strapped down to the pallet, so they're upside down right now, but I do want to point out this beefy brace for the Kickout, so if you actually hit a tree or something with your Kickout, it's not going to crumple. We've also got these gussets welded in at pretty much every point where the tubes connect. It's good solid 120 wall DOM tube. So let's take a look at the hardware kit. We've got one pack of hardware that is used to install the top plates and another pack that is used to install the sliders to the frame, as well as some extra brackets and clamps that make the install easier. We're going to get started by bolting the top plates on. You can choose to do this after the fact, but we're going to go ahead and put them on now. So you use these nice little black bolts. You'll use a 3/16 hex key and then a 1/2 inch socket or a wrench for the backside. All right, we're gonna get started. We're gonna walk through the passenger side first. Before we do, I wanna prep these parts. You'll use these here in just a little bit. We're gonna go ahead and put the clip-in nuts now. So with these little rectangle parts, it's pretty self-explanatory. You just squeeze the cage around this nut and pop it into the hole. For these parts, pay attention to make sure you install these on the correct side. You don't wanna put them in from this side, you wanna put them in from this side. And you need to install them where the clips go across the short side, not across the long side, because you're going to need this adjustability. So just hook it in one side and then squeeze it into the other side. Okay, before we put any hardware in, your truck may have some little stickers or caps in these two holes. If it does, go ahead and pull them out now. The sticker you can scrape off with a knife or a screwdriver, and the same for the little plug. You can do the same thing on the driver's side right now if you like. Before we go under the truck, we're going to take one of these little rectangular plates that we just put the nut in and slide it in this little rectangular hole. Make sure the nut is facing up. So don't worry that it slides down a little bit. We'll be able to get to it later. The most important thing now is that it's in there. There's a little access hole on the back that you can use to get your finger in to kind of help get that situated. Next, we're going to remove this cover. It's a 10mm socket. With the cover off, grab your 12mm socket and take out these two bolts. And then grab a 14mm socket and temporarily take out this bolt. And get a bigger wrench. Now we're ready to put this passenger side slider on. So grab a couple jack stands if you're doing it yourself, so you can set this up and you don't have to hold it, or if you have a buddy to help you, go that route. Grant's gonna hold one end while I put the bolt in the other. So for reference, I've got this roughly aligned front to back where it needs to be. These two front holes in this front bracket are going to be aligned with these two holes that we uncovered. And the first thing we're going to do is that 14mm head bolt that we just pulled out of the bottom of the frame. That's going to be our first bolt to go back in. So have somebody hold the front, hold the back, put this bolt in. And then we're going to find out which of these holes in this plate align with the holes in the frame. Since this works on second gen as well, you'll actually use one more bolt in the second gen, but it's pretty clear. Once you get it aligned with this bottom bolt, you'll be able to see which of the holes to use. So I've got my bolts prepped here. These are the 1.5 inch long 1/2 inch bolts. Put a flat washer on the bolt, then you're gonna stick the bolt through the slider, through the hole in the frame. Then we're gonna put a backing plate on, then a flat washer, and then a lock nut. We're not going to tighten any of this down at this point. We're just going to get it loosely installed so that we can let go and go to the next step. I don't know if you can see this from this angle, but that little bracket that we took off the side of the frame, just make sure it's pulled out and on top. We'll deal with that in a minute, but you don't want it pinched between the slider and the frame. So I've got this lined up so I can put the bolt back in the bottom of the frame. Actually, I'm going to bump it forward just a bit. Get that started. I'm going to get a few turns on this, but not tighten it down. Okay, so I can see on this, on the 3rd gen, right there. And I'm going to go ahead and ask Grant to hold that, and I'll put a nut on the back side of this. So bolt with washer, backing plate, then a flat washer, then the lock nut. Okay, now we can let it hang. Okay, we're under the truck now looking at the passenger side. Now stand corrected, there are still 3 more places where we can put our 1/2-inch bolts. So you can see one here, this round hole, here at this round hole, and here at this rectangle hole for a total of 4. So we'll put those in. Then I wanted to show you the front 2 bolts on the side of the front mount. You can't really get in there with the wrench. So we've got this bracket with the square nuts pre-installed. We're going to fish it through the frame just like this. Install the rear one first and then the most forward bolt after that. So I'm going to get that started. With the back bolt started and tightened down just a little bit, you can use the handle to move this front position up and down to align with the front hole. That's got the 1/2-inch bolts in. Now we're going to switch to the 3/8 bolts. The same thing, we're going to put a washer on the bolt. We'll put it through from the outside. All right, that's got the 1/2-inch bolts in. Now we're going to switch to the 3/8 bolts. Same thing, put a flat washer on the 3/8 bolt. Put it in from the outside through whichever holes you have that are visible for the 3/8 bolts. Then a flat washer, then a lock nut. And this truck has 4 of those total. 1 near the back and 3 closer to the middle. That's got most of the hardware in. Just a note, we still don't have this guy in yet. It's okay. Now we're going to start the tightening sequence. So we're going to begin with this factory bolt. I'm not going to tighten it down completely, but I'm going to tighten it down enough to bring the bottom of the slider flush with the bottom of the frame. Now we're going to tighten down the side bolts, the 1/2-inch and the 3/8. The 1/2-inch bolts use a 3/4-inch socket. 3/8 bolts use a 9/16 socket and wrench. Okay, so that little bracket with the wiring that we removed earlier, it's time to put it back on. You'll notice that the rearward bolt goes through the slider bracket where the front one doesn't. So to make up the difference in space, we're just going to use a stack of 3 washers that we had out of the kit. If you didn't use all 4 of the rectangular spacers for inside the frame, you can just grab one of those. It's the right metal thickness, but we used all of ours, so we're just going to stack up 3 of these extra washers. 12mm socket. If you do want to put the cover back on over the wiring bundle, we'll need to trim just a little bit out of the bottom because there's a gusset for this support tube. You see the gusset right in there. So make sure you're holding it right side up. We're going to cut right next to this rib, up about to this curve, over about 1 inch or so, and then back down. This is my favorite tool for this type of job. Right next to the rib. Quick test fit. Now it clears. And we'll use our factory 10mm bolts to go back on. Now we're ready to put this transmission crossmember bolt in. So it's one of the 1/2" bolts and a flat washer. And that access hole I told you about earlier, you can use to kind of push this back up into position and hold it while you get your bolt started. Go ahead and tighten that one down. That has all the bolts tight so far. Lastly, we're going to install these clamps in these remaining holes. They're basically going to clamp the bottom of the slider to the bottom of the frame. So the front two use the shorter of the bolts that we have left and the shorter of the two spacers for comparison. The back hole uses the longest bolt and the longest spacer. So you're going to take your bolt, the flat washer, put it up through the hole with the spacer, then these top clamp pieces with the lip inside the frame, then a flat washer, and the nut. We'll tighten these down now. We're done with the passenger side. We'll move on to the driver's side. All right, we'll get started on the driver's side. So to prep the outside of the frame, it's the same as the other side. The stickers and plugs that would be here, if you have those, go ahead and take those off. And then anything else that's on the side of the frame, that includes this little bracket. We'll take the 12mm bolt out. I'm going to do the same with these two nuts. This big 14mm here, and also these little clips that hold in wiring, brake lines, etc. And this wire loom has a couple clips here that we're going to pop loose out of the frame. So I'll do all that now. To take these out, you can squeeze the sides. I'm not able to get quite a grip on them. You can use needle nose pliers, but a neat trick I learned the other day, use the flat sides of a 10mm socket, and it's just the right size to push those tabs in. And then pull that out of the way. Able to get these just by hand. Now on the inside, at the driver's side, we've already, from the outside of the frame, loosened up the brake lines, this black electrical box. We need to take off the brake line splitter. And then some trucks will have a cap here. Like you can see, this truck is open all the way. Some of the third gens have a cap that blocks that off. And I didn't mention that on the passenger side, but you'll need to take it off. I believe it's a 12mm socket if you have it. This truck didn't have it. So we'll take off the brake line splitter. Okay, now we're ready to lift this into place. This step is the exact same as what we did on the passenger side. We're going to put this little guy in this hole. And then as we lift this into place, we're going to do the same thing. Grant's going to hold this end up. We're going to line these two holes with these two holes in the frame. And then just make sure to keep anything that's on the outside of the frame out of the way so it doesn't get pinched between the slider bracket and the frame. So we'll lift this up now. Okay, we've got it lifted into place, and just like the other side, I've got this 14mm bolt. I'm going to put it back in the factory hole in the bottom and just get enough threads caught that it holds it. Actually, I'm going to snug it down just so I don't feel like it's going to fall out. Okay, I'm going to put bolt with lock washer through whichever hole is easy to get to right now. And I'm going to go to the back side and use my frame plate. Watch out for the brake lines. And a flat washer and a lock nut. Now we can let go and it's not going to fall. Just like the other side, we're going to find the rest of the holes that are big enough for a 1/2" bolt. On this truck, there's one here, then one back here, and it's a little bit tricky to get to because of the gas tank, but it's really no problem. I can get to it just fine. Just like on the passenger side, we're going to use this long bracket to go just like this, inside the frame. And once again, I'm going to do the rear bolt first and then come around and do the front one. This is a little bit trickier on this side just due to the brake lines. Okay, now we're going to move on to the 3/8 bolts. On this truck, we're only going to put two in. We've got one here and one here. We're going to leave these two out because those are the holes occupied by this that we'll be putting back on in a bit. And then this back hole is reserved to put that brake line white plastic clamp back in. So just like with the other side, we will do bolt with washer and a washer on the inside, and a nut. Same thing here. All right, now it's time to tighten this down. So I'm going to snug this bottom 14 millimeter until the bottom of the brackets are flush with the bottom of the frame. Then I'm going to tighten down this forwardmost 1/2 inch bolt, and then I'm going to tighten down everything. This isn't fully tight yet, we'll do that last. I'm going to backtrack. This bolt here needs to be turned around with the nut on the outside of the frame to give room to put the black box back in. All the bolts are tight. Now we're going to put in this little guy in the transmission cross member. And we'll tighten it down too. We're going to put this black box back in the 2 holes that it came out of with the factory 2 nuts that it had. So I'm just kind of massaging, slightly gently bending these brake lines so that they're protected. I'm going to move them up above some of the bolts and below some of the others, and then we'll put the bracket back in there with the factory bolt. You want to make sure that your brake lines aren't vibrating on anything solid like this bolt. So I popped off this little clamp because it was about here, so I could bring it up here, spread these apart so they're not rubbing on anything. And back here on this one, I just popped it back into the existing hole in the frame, and I made sure that these 2 lines weren't on that bolt. We've got this little bracket that held the wiring harness to the frame. I'm going to put the factory bolt back in and tighten. The last step we've got are these clamps again, and it's the same exact thing as the passenger side. The shorter 2 go on the front 2, and then the rear spot gets the longest bolt and longest spacer. All the clamp bolts are tight. Lastly, we've got this factory bolt. That wraps it up. You'll most likely, almost definitely have some leftover hardware. Don't worry about it. Remember that these fit multiple generations and years of Tacomas, so don't worry about the extra bolts if you follow the instructions. And I want to give a huge thanks to the guys at Pro Tire and Pro Customs in Springdale for letting us use their shop to shoot this video. And that's it. That's been the install of our new 2nd and 3rd gen Tacoma rock sliders. I appreciate you guys watching, and if you have more questions, please reach out to us at BackwoodsAdventureMods.com.